Well, this Women's Month has seen a rise in murders of sex workers across South Africa. In July and August, 5 female sex workers have been brutally murdered, 3 of those under the age of 25. The most recent case was the brutal murder of Desiree Murugan, 39-year-old Durban sex worker who was beheaded and her body discarded at a stadium in Chatsworth. Now, 6 suspects appear at the Chatsworth Magistrates Court today. The suspects, including a woman and a traditional healer, were nabbed by police officers from the Serious and Violent Crimes Task Team. A week ago, Murugan's decapitated body was discovered by municipal workers at the Shallcross Sports Stadium. Sally Shackleton is the Executive Director of the Sex Worker Education and Advocacy Trust, and she joins us now from our Sea Point studios in Cape Town. Good afternoon, Sally, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Thank you for having me.
Sex workers are 18 times more likely to be targeted by perpetrators. Sally, tell us why.
Well, a combination of factors. That statistic actually comes from the US, so it doesn't even take into consideration the very high levels of violence against women we have in South Africa. So we estimate that the problem is more serious than that. Generally, South African women are very vulnerable. We have very high levels of violence against women, some of the highest in the world. And sex workers are made more vulnerable due to their alienation from the criminal justice system, the fact that they are most often poorer women. They work at night very often, and they struggle to find access to services and access to justice. They don't report crimes against them, and so that makes them all the more vulnerable.
Sally, you've tried to initiate partnerships with ward councillors, neighbourhood watchers and police in some areas, but you're being met with what you call hostility and disinterest. Just tell us about some of the barriers you come across in your work, because we know it will take a community response and not just each of us working in isolation to make all our women and girls safer, including sex workers.
Absolutely. Well, we've been met with hostility in one case, and we've made contacts with many local ward councillors. Sometimes the hostility is based on stigma. So people who believe the myths around sex work, for instance, some people think that sex workers bring crime, and therefore they are undesirable in people's neighbourhoods. But for the most part, I think local government councillors that we've made contact with just need clarity in what their role could be.
Sally, you
so
are
in some
planning.
cases when we've met,
Yes, you are planning.
we've explained.
Go ahead, Sally.
So we've explained to local government councillors what we think their role could be in trying to ensure that sex workers are safe.
You are planning a rally in Durban this weekend for the victim in Chatsworth. Now, it is an opportunity to focus action on preventing gender-based violence of this nature. What can we expect from that program, Sally?
Well, it's actually going to be a memorial, so it's to honour Desiree, who was killed in such a brutal way, and to remind everybody that she was a whole person, that she was loved by her family, that she leaves behind people who will miss her, and that she's a human being. So that's what we're wanting to create. We're wanting to support her family, we're wanting to support her friends who may also be sex workers, and we're wanting to start a process of making links with community members, the police and others who could provide protection for sex workers. On the same day, we're also holding a memorial for another sex worker, a 19-year-old, who was killed in Kenilworth, and her body was found in a parking lot in Kenilworth. So on the same day, we'll be having a memorial for that young woman too.
Sally, your organisation welcomed a recent move by Eastern Cape MEC of Social Development, that's Nancy Slihwayi, for her stance on supporting the decriminalisation of sex work in the country. It is a bold and courageous move, but decriminalisation alone is not going to stop these crimes from happening. Tell us why it's crucial to raise awareness among sex workers and the community at large.
Absolutely. Decriminalisation will be one step towards reducing stigma against sex workers. Stigma is supported by the criminalisation of sex work, and the criminalisation of sex work enables abuse of sex workers. So what we're wanting to see is a criminal justice system that responds rather to the needs of sex workers. So this is the first step. We'll need to do a lot of work, as we do right now, which is sensitising healthcare workers to the needs of sex workers, working within communities, and helping sex workers link to one another as well. We've got a movement of sex workers called Sisonke, and that is a movement of sex workers by sex workers to make sure that they're supporting one another as well and forming links with one
Sally,
another.
very quickly before I let you go, why the delay by government to decriminalise this sort of work? Is it a lack of political will maybe, or is it just logistical delays?
I think it's a combination of both. The South African Law Reform Commission didn't have commissioners for the better part of a year, and that caused significant delays in progressing law reform. But at the same time, this issue has been demonstrated by these recent murders is a matter of urgency, and we'd like to see government move faster.
Quickly tell us, how do members of the public reach you, Sally?
We have a 24-hour helpline for sex workers to call, and concerned members of the public can make use of this number. It's 0800 60 60 60.
Thank you. Sally Shackleton is the Executive Director of the Sex Worker Education and Advocacy Trust, joining us from our Seapoint studios in the Mother City. Well, moving on, Mozambique's government and the former rebel movement, Renamo, have now signed a peace deal. This brings to an end nearly 2 years of sporadic clashes between armed partisans of Renamo leader, that's Afonso Dhlakama, and the security forces of President Armando Guebuza's government.
The peace deal brings a relief to Mozambicans who are preparing to go to national polls on October 15.